So this is just one example, or just one suggestion I have to make financial theory, to put ethics into financial theory. Okay, I would like to thank Jamie for organizing this lecture. Was that 5 minutes you said? I don't have my glasses, I can't see properly. I'd like to thank Jamie for organizing the lecture, for DAAD co-sponsoring University of Heidelberg, and of course, Accessor. Thank you very much for your time. I hope this has not been too turgid, but I'm quite happy to take your questions now, if you have any.
Dr. Eckel, in the light of the casino mentality shown by the banks in the world, the German sociologist Ulrich Beck said the other day that capitalism's most potent enemy is capitalism aiming only at profit maximization. Would you agree?
Yes. And we know why it is because, you know, they have been taught that profit maximization should be the goal when it was only supposed to be an assumption to help us do our models, but it's developed in such a way that, you know, most finance students take that maxim without a question. And I think we should deconstruct it, as I have deconstructed it, to tell them that it is not an ought. It is not written in stone. It's not a God-given decree. And I like to show, you know, I mean, the value system of modern financial theory is just two values, right? Self-interest, profit maximization. Those are the two single values. That's all in this value system. So I would call it a very impoverished, a very poor value system. Compare it to, you know, the ethical systems you've been brought up on and taught. Okay, so you have the religious value system. So whether it's Christian or Buddhist or Islamic, very rich value systems with a lot of ethics, developed over 2,000 years, right? Then we have, if you're not religious, we have the secular philosophical systems. Developed again over 2,500 years. We have starting from Plato and Aristotle, virtue ethics, to Kant, to Hume, to, well, if you want, like to Nietzsche, if you want to talk about Nietzsche. But the secular philosophical system is 2,500 years old, also very rich. Now I want to, this is modern finance theory, the ethical system, 60 years in the making, and that's what we have. So I'm saying this is impoverished. It needs to be better. It needs to be improved. We can improve it by putting things like this in, but we have to find a way to do it. That's our project.
Oh, so you're saying that's our project, but do you have any idea what it looks like to start to integrate these new value systems into what we have? Is it training up a whole new generation of financial workers? Is it regulation? You sort of alluded to the fact that regulation is typically too slow to be ahead of the game.
Yeah.
What are the
I think it would be training up a whole generation of financial people. And it has to start by, you know, like my course, which says, not just my course, but, you know, putting finance and ethics and saying, telling them, look, these are assumptions. Please don't think that they are maxioms handed down, you know, on a tablet, on a mountain, right? They're just assumptions which we have changed. And therefore, we are able to put ethics into finance. And I think that, you know, the project is a long-term one, and I don't know if I'm smart enough to do the synthesis, to put it in the math, or to make it just an overarching value system into which you put the quantitative models. I'm not sure how it looks. That's why we're just in the first year of putting this out, and I'd love it to be a collaborative system where people think about it. That's why we're trying to spread the word. And you know, by the time I catch my students in finance who are seniors, it's a little too late already, because they have been very much inculcated into the existing system, and they're already rolling their eyes when I talk about ethics in finance. So I think it should be really early, like high school.
Christian, you had a question?
Yeah, it was actually the same. Did I understand you right, that you're saying we don't need regulations, actually, we just need a new moral and a new generation of...
No, I didn't say that, because I think regulations are important. So that's no doubt, because we need lawyers. Yes, I'm not trying to put you out of a job here. We still need lawyers. It's okay. But you know, it's just like there is no single cure. There's no silver bullet. You know, we need regulation. We need law, of course. We need the rule of law. But we also need people to be self-regulating, not in the sense of, oh, what's my self-interest, but self-regulating in that they have to think ethically. And no one can do that right now because we don't teach them how to. They think it's impossible to think ethically, to tell you the truth, which is ridiculous. Of course it's possible to think ethically. You just have to be taught the ethical systems and ethical reasoning. And then you need good monetary policy. There's no doubt about that. You know, you need good infrastructure and systems within financial firms. There's no doubt about that too, because you need a good system. If it's a really bad system, ethical flaws are inevitable. So it's a whole hodgepodge of things that you need, a basket of solutions, not a single solution.
And one other question, what you described right now, all applies to the crisis, what we are facing in 2008, where the whole financial system kind of collapsed due to all the bubbles in America, also in Europe. What we are facing right now, especially in Europe, but actually applied also to all the workers, I think the United States are more or less in the same situation. We are facing also another problem, which is like the monetary problems of the individual states, which is another complete different, how I say, crisis, because this has nothing to do with the market. The market is just reacting right now to the financial status of the different states. And actually the market is reacting in a quite rational way, because they are realizing, well, that's
they're insolvent.
How they did it in the past, that's not, there's no end. So what is your conclusion, or what is your assumption? How does those two crises now, like the financial crisis on the one thing, and that the whole financial system itself collapsed, and that we need more ethics and regulations on that part, but this crisis combined with the other crisis, that the markets in a rational way realize, well, with all the debts which are the states are doing, or doing, having, and creating, that this does not work. Where does all this end?
Where does all this end? Just a small question. You know. And I have 2 minutes to answer it. But I would say you're right. There's the financial crisis, which is all the, you know, the bad doings of financial institutions and financiers. But I would not say that the sovereign debt crisis, you mean the sovereign debt crisis in Europe? I wouldn't say that that is totally divorced from the financial crisis, because what is the root, the cause of the sovereign debt crisis? It's overborrowing. Why did they overborrow? Because they all promised too much. So there's an ethical issue in that you're spending too much, you're borrowing to spend in order to be elected, right?
And the market ran
right.
money, right? And
who were the people who issued your debt? They were the financial institutions. Now, there is a lot of, we have a case study on the website on the Greek debt crisis. Now, they entered the union falsely, correct? Because they said that their debt was less than what it was. And they were allowed, or they were helped in this masking of the debt by Goldman Sachs, who issued various instruments to mask the real level of debt. So I would say that too was a financial problem caused by financial institutions, and when you say finance, it's not just financial institutions, you know, it's government finance, it's international finance, it's IO finance. Finance spreads everywhere. I mean, there is finance in universities, a lot of financial issues and ethical issues in colleges and university financing, which we're going to write about soon, unless they fire me from KU for writing about it. But, so finance has this web everywhere, and there are ethical issues in finance in all these areas. Now, you know, one last thing I'd like to say, not if there's no other question, is that, you know, why do I do this? Why do I embark on this project? I'm actually retired, I told Git. I'm actually retired. I actually want to read, watch, and write science fiction, which is actually what I love. And I love being with my fellow science fiction geeks, because they're one of the nicest bunch of people I've ever worked with. But why do I embark on this project, which is quixotic? I feel like I am David in a Goliath of huge financial institutions, academics. The whole establishment of finance is based on what I just talked to you about. It's based on that theory of modern finance, which is self-interest, profit maximization. Why do I do this? Because I know it sounds hokey, right, and cheesy, but I do it because I want to have a better world for Shira, my daughter. Thank you for listening, dear. Because I want a world in which finance is ethical, and you know, we think about it before we calculate GDP, which is just gross domestic product, but we don't talk about usage of the planet, we don't talk about global warming, because it's not taken into account in our GDP figures. I want it to be a better financial model so that we can have a better world, which is not all consuming, okay, but also sustainable. And I know that word is overused, but that is why I'm doing it, to actually make a better world so that Shira lives in a better world. And this is a small contribution that I can make through my institute. Any other questions?
So you mentioned that when you are teaching your students, by the time you get to them, they're rolling their eyes. I know that on the legal sense, through Professor Ball's class, we've seen social justice and economics that way, but what's the level of interest that you're seeing from the financial sector in actually trying to make a change, if any?
Okay, I have a great deal of skepticism from the academy. Okay, the biggest wall I face is not actually practitioners, because as I said, people act according to ideas. So what they've been taught, they act upon. So if the practitioners are taught differently, they won't roll their eyes. But who teaches the practitioners? Professors, right? Finance professors. And they must change their paradigm. But they will not, because it's very set. It's an ideology, just like any ideology. You know, Marxist ideology, postmodernist ideology, any ideology which is stuck into the mindset of the academy is very hard to remove, except through generational change. So yeah, there is a lot of climbing over to do, and most of it is in the academy. And as I said, my course is one of 5 in the whole of the US, Global Finance and Ethics. And it's only one book on this, written by one man. I'm writing a book on finance and ethics, but you know, I'm writing with 2 co-authors on investment management, ethics, and practice. But depending on how slow I work in retirement, that's supposed to come out in 2014. So that will be 2 books. So it's slow, and I think it is generational change, but that's why I came out of retirement, to teach. If I catch one student in my class who gets that eureka moment, who gets the, wow, the light bulb, saying, like, I get it, I think it's worth it. Because he goes into practice and he practices it. You know what I mean? He thinks, he stops himself before he does a deal, which smells smelly, okay? And I'm not saying that everybody in finance is unethical. That is not true. But I think we could have an improvement. I seek improvement. I don't seek perfection, but just an improvement. It is a fine thing. Gross domestic product is, once again, it wasn't given to us in stone, you know, not with lightning and said, you must use gross domestic product. It's just a measure of how much we produce, gross domestic product. It's not a measure of how much we use to produce that. So you can use up the entire, you know, beautiful Amazon jungle to produce your product, and that would be positive. But it would be pretty negative for the Amazon. So we need to change how we measure that, and there's been movement, but all these movements, sustainability movement, green movement, the GDP movement to change it to something which talks about consumption as well as production, all these are still peripheral. But they're becoming more mainstream. They're becoming more mainstream, ironically, because of market forces.